Okay, so I really let the team down in February. I had my slowest reading month in the history of the channel. And yes, I get February is the shortest month of the year, but I only finished 5 books, guys. Admittedly, we had two incredible reads, two good to great reads, like pretty decent reads, and then one read that wasn't for me. But not as much reading was done. So time management is going to be a big focus in March because I've got a holiday coming up. So I'm going to have even less time to read this year. And I know usually you'd read more on a holiday, but probably going to be reading less this one. Going to have a lot of things to do. So let's get into this wrap up in TBR. We'll go over the 5 books I read in February, the 3 books I'm reading now and will be continuing to read in March, plus the March TBR, what books I'll be planning to read to get back on track. I've got some shorter reads, I've got some different reads. We'll go over the book club read for Fable and for the Patreon. So if you haven't heard, I just recently started up a Patreon for the channel if you want to give a little extra support. Got a private Discord for it and just some little extra content for you guys. So if you want to support the channel extra, that'd be fantastic. But just make sure you like the video, you watch it, you subscribe to the channel, and comment down below the best book you read in February and what you're planning to read in March. I appreciate all of you that watch these videos so much. I love the community that we have here. And with that, let's jump into the books I read in February. First up, we had Harbinger of Justice, book one of the Shadowbinders series by fellow booktuber Andrew Watson. Last year, I read Silence is Silver, the prequel novella for this, and I absolutely loved that novella. It was like a coming of age, finding out what someone wants to do with their life while they go through a trials in a very interesting, like religious society sort of setting. And it was, just action packed, came with a hit, really good world building, really beautiful descriptive writing, really lovely prose in like a 78-page story. I loved it. So that was your guys' book club read for the month, and I think the book club had quite a great time with it. But my read for the month was Harbinger of Justice, getting into the main series. I didn't enjoy Harbinger of Justice as much as I did Silence is Silver, but I still had a really good time. Now, the structure of this book is we kind of have like a mystery unfolding leading into an epic fantasy story all throughout. So I don't want to really touch on what the plot is, as it just gives some like little spoilers away. But we've got an epic fantasy playing out that is kind of like a fact-finding mission in book one, just following the leads, trying to understand what this mysterious magic is that's going on, that's returning to this world. We're in a very creative setting. I found the highlight of this book to be Andrew's world building. All the animals, all the magics, all just the different like elements of like the lands that this story takes place in. We're kind of like in this desert continent where just weird things happen, and all of the world building just felt super fresh and exciting. Like there's animals that our characters ride around on called Aya that are just these huge, massive beasts that you like can fit like platforms on their backs, and our characters ride around on them. So just huge beasts need to be in fantasy more often, like animals that you can ride on the backs of that aren't just dragons and horses. Really appreciate that. This desert, it's light most of the time. There's only a very short period of night. And when it is night, the desert, the sand turns black and goes rock solid. So you can get stuck in the sand. Very interesting sort of stuff. I just love the complete freshness of the world building. The magics are very interesting in how they tie in to the plot of the story. Left me asking a lot of questions. I really like Andrew's writing style. It's not overly flowery, but it's still got a good amount of descriptiveness. It's very easy to read. It's very smooth to read. He will often leave some like philosophical questions in there, so it'll get you thinking on another level. Then you're like, oh, that's a really nice quote. I'll write that down. So really lovely writing, incredible world building, really good characters that you're going to like and you're going to want to cheer for. And there's some real good exploration of our characters in the sort of themes of how your past traumas affect your decision making skills. Really like just how that shows up quite a few times throughout the book. The overall plot, I liked the mystery building throughout, but I felt the ending was a little lackluster. Things tied up a little bit too neatly. And for a 460-page book, I felt like the stakes didn't really get big enough at the end. Like we didn't have that big battle or sequence of unfolding events that really hooked me in. It was kind of like it was kind of like saying like, oh, that interests me, so I'll read the next book. But it wasn't a satisfying read by itself because of that plot wise. But I already have started the next book in the series, The Black Mantle, that just came out in February. Then the last little thing I add is tone wise and like maturity wise. It kind of reads on a similar level to like a Sanderson novel. So it feels a little catered to a younger audience. It doesn't feel like as dark and gritty like an Abercrombie or Erickson. Writing wise, I prefer it to a Sanderson. Just tone wise, it kind of matches that sort of level. Then the next book I read was Red Country by Joe Abercrombie. So this is the last book in the trilogy of standalones set between the two proper trilogies in the First Law world. So book 6 of 9. And like most other people, Red Country was my least favorite, but I still had a really good time of Red Country. I loved all the characters. I was highly invested in each of the character stories, more so even than A Little Hatred, which I read just after. Like every single character was great. Their journeys throughout the books were really good. I was highly invested in each character. It was a really enjoyable read. The humor was nonstop throughout. You like with every Abercrombie book, just he sets that gritty, like real down to earth tone. Like you really feel like you are like trekking through muddy ground. You got mosquitoes biting you, and you just feel uncomfortable in your skin. Like he pulls that tone out of a book. He chucks in so much like humor that just has you chuckling the whole time. I really liked the added world building, so we got to see like a new area of the Circle of the World that we haven't seen before. We kind of got like a frontier, like a gold rush sort of setting, and just like undiscovered territories or unclaimed territories. Very interesting, like setting, getting something fresh. But the overall plot of the book didn't really interest me that much. So I enjoyed the reading experience. I didn't feel like I was getting a bigger story that I really was that invested in. So I wasn't interested in the book, though I still enjoyed it, if that sort of makes sense. And there was one scene right at the end of this book that Abercrombie has been like building up to and like teasing us about for 4 books now. And he kind of just left that in the most unsatisfactory manner you could leave it. Like, what was the point of even having that aspect of the book included if you're just going to leave it like that? Um, so it kind of left me very unsatisfied on one of the characters' journeys through this book. A non-POV character, so it's like a very minor complaint in that regard. But going on to A Little Hatred, the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy, so book 7 of 9 in the First Law world, I had a fantastic time with this. I didn't enjoy all the POVs like I did with Red Country, but the POVs I did enjoy, I absolutely loved. 4 of my new favorite characters in all of fantasy, particularly the kids of one of my favorites from the first trilogy, just 2 of the best characters I have ever read. I'm reading them now in A Trouble with Peace. Just incredible. It's crazy how big a world and cast Joe has been able to build across the 9 books that he's written. So obviously I finished 7, I'm halfway through the 8th, and just we've now spent time on every continent, because in each of the standalones and with each of the trilogies as a whole, we got completely new casts. Although we see some of the same characters pop up in each book, we don't get in their heads unless it's their trilogy or their standalone. So we've been in the heads of so many different characters across all these continents that we just get such a huge fleshed out world where we understand so many of the different political players, even if we're not in their head in the book that we're reading. So in Age of Madness, in A Little Hatred, we get the POVs of all the kids, of all the characters we love in the first Law trilogy, and in Best Served Cold and the Heroes. And all these POVs are just as good, if not better, than their parents. Like, it's crazy how well Joe just does all of his character voices, how well he fleshes them out, where we understand their motivations, their drives, their decision-making processes just make complete sense because of how good Joe does with his characters. You just feel compelled to go about each character's day with them. So it very much feels like we're reading like a soap opera or a drama. Like you're just invested in the day-to-day lives. It's not like the big epic fantasy where we're just like focused on taking down this big bad. No, we're just compelled like just seeing this character go through their days, and then the politics that build up around them, there's a ton of politicking going on that is just super interesting. And it's not just the politicking of like kings against kings, it's the governments that support the kings. It's the merchants that are rising up because we are now in like a state of industrial revolution. So there's just so much going on that it's not just kings against kings, it's really in-depth politics that just feels so rich and alive. The drama is just dramaing. It is getting me stressed how much drama is going on for our characters. I read the first 5 First Law books, and now I've been doing the audiobooks for Red Country onwards. Stephen Pacey completely lives up to the hype. The accents that he gives his characters, really well done. I am loving the audiobooks. Can't wait to keep this going. And speaking of books that are narrated perfectly, I read Gardens of the Moon next, well, listened to Gardens of the Moon next, and this one was a reread for me as I'm planning on tackling all of Malazan this year. And oh, even better on reread. It's so good. I'm even making a standalone video just for Gardens of the Moon, going over Malazan, why I think it's more accessible to read than so many people think. It's quite often told like that Malazan's just going to confuse the hell out of you. I don't believe that, so I'll be highlighting that video. So please check that out when it comes out. Single book videos don't tend to do well, but it's definitely going to be a one to watch because I'm going to be going over like what it's about and why it is more accessible than you think and how you can have a really good time with it. And it really just feels like it is the final boss of fantasy. So I've read the first 2 books in this one, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be my favorite series of all time because it is just elite in all categories. The characters are on par with Abercrombie. The writing is on par with Abercrombie and Wirtz, where he's a little bit more flowery and descriptive of his prose than Abercrombie, but he still has that humor there. He just doesn't use as much of it. But the floweriness, the descriptiveness of his prose just paints a vivid picture for his world, which has the most full-on world building, both in history and lore, but in just the amount of different magics, the amount of different beings and elder races and different magical creatures he has in his books. Super full-on and out there. The amount of different characters we get. So we get great characters and we get a lot of them. Fleshed out characters that we understand their motivations and drives. And it's really impressive that we can understand each character so well, even though we don't get as much time with them because we get so many different POVs across his books. And then the plots are just always huge and just so interesting and full on. Like you get both a military fantasy, like you get down and dirty with the soldiers, you get in the generals' heads, you get in some assassins and some thieves' heads. Like you get the story of the Malazan Empire and the surrounding kingdoms. You get everything of Malazan. I can't wait to do a full video of this one for you guys. Then the last book I finished off in February, the book I started February with, Arkoma by Callum Lott. So this was a nice circuit breaker sort of read. It wasn't the style of read that I particularly like, but it was a fun little sci-fi space opera Western heist revenge story. So we're in like a frontier setting out in space. So there's no real organized government. There's just a solar system run by a bunch of mobs. We're following someone that has lost it all to one of these mobs. They get a chance to get revenge on one of these guys in the form of a heist, and that's a story. Western sort of vibe. So, you know, like the gun-toting pistols and jewels and that Western, like hick Southern slang sort of thing going on with the language. So if that's what you're looking for, that's what you'll get. It's a quick, easy read, very short chapters. Wasn't my sort of thing. There was just some weird choices that didn't work for me, but for the most part, easy, enjoyable read. Now, what are the books I'm in the middle of, and what are the books I'm going to be reading in the month of March? Now, as you guys know, when it comes to setting up my TBR, I like to set myself up with 10 different options of books to read in a month, and I try to read 8 of those. Now, given the fact that I'm in the middle of 3 at the moment, and some of the books to come are shorter reads, I think I'm going to be able to get that 8 down this month. So the 3 that I'm in the middle of at the moment, I am still working my way through The Ships of Merior, Book 2 of The Wars of Light and Shadow by Johnny Wirtz. The only reason I haven't finished this one yet is it's a buddy read. I'm just waiting for the person I'm reading it with to catch up. Absolutely loving this. I was just reading a chapter last night and just having so much fun. It was the most comedic scene I have ever read in a book, in a fantasy book specifically. Johnny's writing just paints such a vivid picture. I love the world building. I love the characters. I love the cast. I love the duo that we're following in this one. Can't wait to just keep reading The Wars of Light and Shadow in March. Then the interesting read that I'm having at the moment that I've just started is Teeth of the God. This is a graphic novel by the band Sleep Token. If you don't know, that is my favorite band. And just the artwork in this novel is very lovely, very interesting. The only issue I'm having at the moment, and I only recently, like I only just started it, is just this takes me a long time to read. Just that cursive is really tough for me to get my head around. But definitely excited to sink my teeth into a graphic novel. And, you know, who knows, this might spark me getting into manga. I might have to try some manga next. Should I even start a channel to review some manga if I get into it? We'll have to see how things go. Then, as you know, the other book I'm in the middle of, The Trouble of Peace by Joe Abercrombie, the second book in the Age of Madness trilogy, book 8 of 9 total in the First Law World, 61% of the way through this one. So I should finish this one off straight as March starts. And then the other audiobook I've just started to go into, Dead House Gates, book 2 of Malazan. Reading this one with my missus, and yeah, just super excited to smash through Malazan this year. Absolutely loving it. Audiobook is fantastic for that one. Then the 7 other books and what we'll be doing for our book club. So, book club in March on both Fable and Patreon, we're going to be doing Troll Mountain by Matthew Riley. So, Matthew Riley, one of my favorite action writers, probably my favorite action writer of all time. I read a lot of his books growing up, and I never knew he'd ventured into the world of fantasy, but he's really short little episodic fantasy, nothing special, but something that should be a fun, easy afternoon read. Troll Mountain, I'm excited to get into it. I just loved what it said on the top by the Daily Telegraph, the perfect bedtime read that would sit on the shelf next to the fantastic journeys of Bilbo Baggins and Harry Potter. Now, obviously, I don't expect this book to hold up to The Hobbit or Harry Potter at all, but it's by an author I love. It's a genre I love. I've got to check it out. You guys can check it out with me. Links down in the description for that. Then I'll be continuing on my first little read. I'll go finish off Age of Madness with The Wisdom of Crowds. Then I do have to finally get back to the Great June trilogy. I read the first 2 books of June like early last year, and it has been way too long. I'm going to be finishing off book 3, Children of June, reading this one with a friend, and yeah, can't wait to be finally finishing this one off. Then continuing with the theme of finally actually finishing off things that I've started, I'll be going into books 6 and 7 of Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman, and finally catching up to the author with where the series is at. I've loved everything Dungeon Crawler Carl so far, so I'm just going to imagine it's going to be a great time with those 2 books. Then also continuing on with Shadowbinders after reading Harbinger of Justice this month, reading Black Mantle in the month of March. I may have been reading just a little bit as like my pre-bed read at the moment, as it's just a nice easy read as I'm falling off to sleep. Then the last thing I plan to read is another short novella, A Short Stay in Hell. I don't really know too much about this one. I assume it's just someone that's been thrown to hell for a few seconds, and we get a nice bleak existential crisis sort of read that we can jot through in an afternoon. I think I'll also do a reading vlog for this one on the Patreon. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you had a really good month of reading in February. Make sure you let me know what you read in February, what was the best book you read, what was the worst book you read, and what are you going to be reading in March. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.